Okay, we have exciting news, listeners. Welcome back. We have decided on a name, and and
Like 10 episodes.
right. We're not, mostly through season 1 or anything, but we have a name. So uh, and it's one of those things where Rachel actually suggested the name and she texted me. It was just like randomly. And I was like, yes, actually, that has been there the whole time because we both wanted we both wanted it to have something to do with a mask. And I've been holding on to this like thing about like take your mask off. Like that's what I'll label our recording sessions of like take your mask off because we believe in showing up in like raw form, getting to know the actual person behind the brand that we create for ourselves on social media and things like that. And with Rachel's work with soul contracts, like she talks about masks all the time. So you want to tell
Oh, we're going to be the Unmasked Podcast.
So we are now named. We just have to create a logo and all of that stuff now. But we have a name. And so similar to how we started this podcast, like just letting things flow, letting things, come to form as they're supposed to. We have jokingly called this podcast the Unnamed Podcast for like all of the episodes. So for us to now have this shift towards the Unmasked Podcast, which gives us both what we've been saying mixed with what we wanted in there. And then of course, all the SEO can come with like whatever we name it. But like having that in there is just like very exciting. So, welcome to the Unmasked Podcast. I am the co-host, one of the co-hosts of this podcast, Diamond Drip. Hey, and my lovely, my lovely co-host, Rachel. Say hi.
Hey, everybody.
Okay, so announcements are out of the way. Exciting times. And we're going to get deep today. We're going to do some healing here together today. And we always come into these like, what's going on with you? And just whatever is going on with us, taking the mask off. We just kind of use this as a place and a space and place to do some of the healing that we need to do. And so in our last episode, Rachel was talking about like being a caregiver and like all of the things. And like I have one child who is enough. She has she has boys. She has boys and a husband. Like
and I have a daughter too, so
yes. So like all the caretaking things. So as she was talking, I was like, wait, it sounds like she has gate 27 in her chart. And so I looked and I confirmed that she has gate 27. It's unconscious in her and it's activated in me on my unconscious and conscious side. So I thought we could work through some of these reflection questions together. and if you take something from it, especially if you have this gate 27 in your chart, maybe hearing us talk raw and open about how this shows up for us is something that can help you. So what is this gate 27? It is the gate of caring. So it is located in the sacral in human design, bringing in a little bit of gene keys. And we talk about how things are vibrational. So it's transforming the shadow of selfishness into the gift of altruism. And at its highest frequency is selflessness. So if you are a holder of this gate, you have an innate quality focused on maintaining and enhancing the quality of life through the power to care for the weak, the sick, and the young. Your role is to nourish and nurture the power of compassion. You care. Remember to care for yourself in order to have the energy and resources to care for others. Your challenge is to care without overextending yourself and to allow others to take responsibility for their own challenges and choices. So that always sounds great.
In theory.
Right, right. So what I usually like to do is I like to talk about the repressive versus the reactive side so we can identify where we've been living in this gate, because many of us, due to our conditioning, like it's like we said, it sounds great in theory, this gate in the gift frequency. However, we often lived in the shadows. So I want to encourage us to reflect on like how this has shown up for us, where have we lived, and then we'll get into a few questions that will help us process some of this energy. Okay, so in the repressive, we self-sacrifice ourselves to help others, have no sense of personal boundaries, causing us to deplete ourselves energetically. So that's in the repressive. And the reactive can be giving with an agenda and do things purely to receive something in return. So I feel like if I'm looking back throughout most of my life, I feel like it's been repressive. Um, I, we had a whole episode about boundaries.
Yeah.
I was like, I thought I knew what boundaries were, but I was like, after reflecting on and setting some, I was like, nah, I don't think I really had boundaries. So for me, I think I lived a lot in the repressive.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Me too.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Okay. All right. So, um, first question to help us kind of start processing this energy is, am I taking responsibility for things that aren't mine to be responsible for? I know, right?
Now, if you'd asked my like 35-year-old me, I would have said like in every damn thing and every damn emotion that was known to man. Then I wised up. Um, and to bring in like soul contracts, because this is a funny thing, because a lot of people have this in their physical aspects of their soul contract. Because in a soul contract, there's two aspects. There's a physical and then there's spiritual. And about the age of 35 is when people flip to the spiritual more so than the physical, because they most of the karma that they're going to deal with, they've already dealt with it by then or experienced it. And so they've got to figure out what to do with it. And so for me, that idea of uh, being self-sacrificing is huge in my physical aspect of it, because one was programmed to be self-sacrificing for the sake of, what I don't know at this point. Like I still am like confused with that. Something I'm like, I constantly going, okay, so why did we have to do that way? Like, logic doesn't even make sense sometimes with it anymore. But then two was because I was kind of trained in a certain way through my religious upbringing, I had to like go, okay, what things are mine? And I know early on in my healing process, I had to really discover who the originator of those things were. And oftentimes I thought a person was the originator and realized they weren't. It was somebody else. Or it went like, because a lot of things, we all have mommy and daddy issues. So we want to displace everything on mommy and daddy, because it's easy. That's the easy person to like throw it on, to blame, to be angry at. But then I realized, there was my grandma mixed in there. There was the little old lady at church. There was the neighbor. There was like all of these people, like, and a lot of times for me, it was words. Like they would say something like just even in passing or in Sunday school class, or where, we could have been playing volleyball or whatever at church, but it was something that was said and it really like imprinted because of that training. Like their words meant like they were law. And so when I kind of came into my own like spiritual awakening, which it didn't happen at 35, it happened a little bit later than that for me. Figuring out who those people were and going, you can take that back, honey, because I don't want it anymore. That was such a freeing experience because, yeah, you can return somebody's energy to them like tenfold and say, you can take that shit back. And I had to do that. I took about a year and a half to go through a lot of those things and to give that energy back. I still default into that because that's just the way that I was wired for so long. Now I'm conscious when it happens. And so that's for me where I'm at right now, is being conscious when I want to default and not allowing myself to default. So that's where I'm at in the process.
I love that. And you also answered the second question that comes with that. So can I return the responsibility back to its owner? So that was the second question. And you kind of like wrapped it in there all in once.
Absolutely. Give it back to them. Give it back. Let them deal with it.
Yeah.
Because it goes, honey.
Yes. So for me, right now, the reason why this came up as a topic for me, again, this is, taking the mask off. One of the things that I am starting to understand about human design is that like it can actually impact your health. Like I knew that like it can save you from burning out because you're using your energy inefficiently and all of those things. But I recently have been doing a deep dive with my partner now that he's open to it. Because at first he was just like, you're nerding out about this thing that I don't know or understand. And like, I don't, whatever. But now he's in a place where he's more receptive to what it is that I'm saying. And so like, he's been experiencing some health issues, like gastro, things like that. And so like we looked at which gate was like associated with that. And we looked at some of the things that have been like impacting him. And like his heart center is completely open. And the gate that's associated with the stomach is like the gate of it's the gate of aloneness. And so in our relationship recently, I've had to kind of compartmentalize myself in a way. So there's Coach Diamond, who creates a space that is open for reflection and no judgment, and you can just let all of your things out. But then there's Partner Diamond, who is very much still healing and still does not trust and still, is a partner and wants her partner to be there. And so one of the reasons why this came up for me was because like in noticing how his health has been affected by him being in his not self and being in the shadows of certain gates, I started to notice like a week or two after we were doing this work that like I pay attention to my cycles because I use the fertility awareness method. So I had just this week, I had just gone through my ovulation cycle. So this is supposed to be the part where I am having the most energy because the progesterone and the testosterone and just all the things are like at their peak. And I did not feel that way. And and my uterus, it was like, I was like, why does it feel like I'm having cramps when I know my cycle, like my menstruation part of my cycle doesn't start for like another 2 weeks? What the heck is this? So I did what I did for him. And I was like, okay, what center is associated with like reproductive things? It was the sacral. And immediately I knew which one it was because I know that I've lived in the shadow of this 27, the gate of caring, because like I do care. Like even Partner Diamond is like, of course I want you to feel better. But learning things like you need to be alone more. Like you need to have time to yourself and like being like, but also I want love. Like, especially with me being like, he's a non-emotional and I'm an emotional. So like all my emotions, I'm in my fields. And so when it was funny, because we'll get to the third question, But when I first looked at these questions, when I was having that pain, I was like, I don't know that these resonate with me. I
Because you were in your feels, sweetheart.
was
Physically in
like,
your feels.
right? Yes. And so I had a talk with somebody who used one of the words in the next question, and I was like, damn, I need to retake a look at these questions, and I need to think about how this is actually showing up for me, because apparently hurt me is like, I don't have these things. I'm okay, right? But my body's like, actually though,
Mhm.
you're holding some energy that is making you not okay.
Right.
So when it comes to this question, like, am I taking responsibility for things that aren't mine to be responsible for? Like 100%. I'm at a I'm at a point right now in my business and my life where things are really starting to click. Things are really starting to align. Like I'm getting opportunities, I'm getting, like speaking things, and it's like, and he, especially having a 4 in his profile, like he's the supporter. He's like, "Yes, go do the things." And throughout our relationship, we've known each other for 10 years, and we have a child together who is 7. So 7 of those have been parent dynamics. But when we first got together, he did something that broke our trust. And so for a lot of our relationship, like he has been kind of this self-sacrificing state, because he's had to, or felt as though he had to prove to me that he's here, this is where he wants to be. And of course he's made mistakes throughout that time that have made me question, and like I said, the partner me is hurt,
Right.
and I think quite frankly has, like, I think I looked it up before, like emotional PTSD or something like that. um and there are those aspects that need to be healed, but he hasn't paid attention to those parts of himself. He's just kind of been like, I'm going to show up, I'm going to root you on, I'm going to be that like person. And so for him to like realize that he has been hurting himself this whole time, and now like he's having these issues with his health because like he needs to take time alone, he needs to figure out how he can show up and be in his highest vibrational alignment and things like that. And
Mhm.
he doesn't know what that is. Like there's a certain part of me that like partner me is like, yeah, but like you needed to do those things, because if you didn't do those things, like I wouldn't be here. Like there were several times where I was like, I'm gone.
Mhm.
Like you want to do whatever with whoever, I'm okay. And he like, took on that role of like, I'm gonna be here. I'm gonna prove to you that this is where I want to be, et cetera, et cetera. And so now like he is in his anxiety and his depression, and he's stuck in his patterns so
Mhm.
much that like he told me he got an opportunity for something. And I'm like, yes, go and take it. Absolutely. What are you talking about? You haven't gotten back to the person. When did they reach out to you? Has it been a week? Like, what are you doing?
Right.
And there's this responsibility that I feel almost. I'm like, you gotta, like, even though like there's like a duality in me, I'm like, okay, if we're both really busy, then like who's gonna be there for Taylor? Like that's something we have to figure out. But there is like this responsibility like in me that feels like, I have to help in these ways, and it's starting to hurt me, and I am more in touch with the feels and things in my body, especially doing this work, that it's like, okay, I'm catching it early. Like he's probably felt it and just ignored it, and I'm
Right.
like, well, I can't ignore this because my uterus hurts, it's rebelling against me. So
I wanna interject something here because this is something I've dealt with, and I've been on this planet a lot longer than you have, and I've been married for, this is my 25th year being married, and so when I started this journey, we were probably 18, 19, 20 years married, and so like we're established. Like we've done all the things. We've been through the honeymoon phase. We've been through the fights. We've been through the in-law shit, all that. You know, we've dealt with all of that. Got kids, you know, was having an adult kid at the time. Now that was a trip to deal with. But, you know, it was one of those things that when I was seeking out like guidance, because when you become a person who's more aware or more awoke, I'm not a big fan of that word, but more awakened to yourself, the people around you are not, most likely. And so I had to make a conscious choice because I was told 1,000 times something different. But I knew within my own internal gut that I needed to stick the course with my spouse because I was the lead at this point in time for the spiritual. And so that was even hard for me because I had grown up being told the man was the spiritual leader of the household. My husband is a very spiritual person, very, you know, I mean, he's a trained theologian. Hello. You know, like we can't get away from some of that stuff. But it's one of those things like I had to go, okay, that's his, this is mine. He doesn't get it the same way I do, but I'm not going to stop. He's going to have to figure it out eventually. And I had to give him grace, lots of grace, because it's so funny. You keep talking about the moon things. Literally right before this, he was like, he sent me this article. Do you realize there's going to be a blue moon at the end of August here in Arizona? And I'm like I literally did a double take of it because that's his way of saying, I'm paying attention to what you're going through. I don't understand it. I may not want to, some partners may not want to understand it, but it doesn't mean that you're a vibrational mismatch. It just means that you got to figure out how to regulate your vibration with the people around you, because that's something we don't talk about. 99% of the people you're going to be around are not vibrational matches for you. They're just not. Most of us that are in this like light worker, light leader, awakening stages, awareness, whatever you want to call it, stages, we're rare people. We're the anomalies, we're the outliers. And so if we begin ditching all the people around us, so kudos to you for sticking it out with your partner, even though the shit is shit, man, at times. Because there was times I was like, are we going to make it? But I knew that if I didn't stick around and I didn't teach my kids, I didn't teach my family members, I didn't teach my spouse, I didn't teach the people that were in my sphere of influence, just because they weren't vibrationally matched to me, if I didn't teach them, who was? Who was going to show them that example? Now that's a religious thing right there, big time. Like, you know, go out and do all. But it was one of those things. Like I really had to stick to my guns with that. Has it been easy? Oh hell no. I'm not going to say it's going to be easy because it's not. But to me, it's worth it because I see it in my kids. I see it in my husband sending me something about the blue moon. Like he talks to me about astrology all the time now. Like he just finds it fascinating. Like, hello, you know, and it's one of those things like, I think sometimes when we get into this, we just want to start like getting rid of all the things that aren't aligned or vibrationally with us. And sometimes we're needed in those spaces because those people need us. And it could be other people too, not just our families. So I just kind of want to put that out there because I think sometimes people are just like, oh, well, if they're not a vibrational match, cut them off. And I struggle with that. And that may be that self-sacrificing portion of myself and my human design. But if I can overcome the 37 years of entrenchment in religion, like I was, feeling and knowing from the time I was like 10 years old that I was going to die doing this, like that was my philosophy with it, my way of living with it, to change that and walk away from it and go, you know what, there's something different and something better. Anybody can do it. So I believe that other people around me can do it, even if they're not accepting at this juncture. Maybe one day they will. You know, that's the way I look at it. So I just want to interject that.
I appreciate that.
Now back to the third question.
Right? Yeah, I've teed it up so much. So the third question is, what role does guilt play in motivating me? Can I let go of the guilt?
Is it your guilt or somebody else's guilt?
I feel like for me, this came up after having that conversation with the person. It's my guilt because there's a certain part of me that acknowledges that, there were opportunities that he didn't take because he felt as though he would be in an environment where he would be around other females, and he just didn't want the conflict or the friction of me finding out that he was in a room with a bunch of females that I didn't know. And if I found out what one of them looked like and I thought they were attractive, then that's friction for him. So he's just like, you know what? I'm going to just stay at home. So I feel like, for me, when I read that, it was like with the new understanding, it was like, no, it's my guilt. And it's one of those things where it's like the second part is, can I let go of it? And the honest answer is I'm trying, because there is that part of me that understands why he denied those things, but I was reminded that I have to be in the present. And so while I may feel guilty because of opportunities that he passed on in the past because of what we were going through, at the end of the day, we're not there anymore. We also can't live in the past the same as we can't live in the future. That's anxiety. So it's like you have to be in the present moment. So the honest answer is I'm trying to.
And that, I mean, and I think that is an honest answer. I think most of us, we can either sit and wallow in our guilt, or we can look at it and go, okay, I know I'm here. Like, what now? What do I do with it? And knowing or asking that question, what do I do with it, is a freeing question, because you're recognizing in the present as to what it is. And for many of us, we don't recognize guilt, I think, correctly. And because I had a similar situation that you and your partner have had, to shed a little light, because my husband was always kind of in a predominant leadership role when we were in the religious context. And when we moved into the business context, there was a time where I took a prominent role and I was the leader. And I'm not a person, I'm more of a networker person. So I have conversations with everybody. And so I was kind of in that space. And there were times where I would go to events, and business owners that were male would approach me and would be talking to me about something, but there would be a picture on social media, or there would, maybe somebody I went with would say something and my husband was around. And not that it caused him to question me, but it was just the typical dude response, like, hey, wait a second. And I probably would have had the same response if it would have been flipped. And so recognizing that, hey, this is my chosen partner for this lifetime. This is something that makes him uncomfortable. I'm going to make a decision not to put myself in those positions. And I did. And so, because I still would meet male entrepreneurs or business owners. So I always took a girlfriend that, was in business or whatever. I'd always take another woman with me. So I was never so like I set boundaries around where we were at the present time. And there was a few relationships that I finally just said, hey, I'm not going to be able to do these business relationships, because one, it's not going to work if my husband's not on board. And it's not going to work just because it's not going to work. Like, like if there's some friction, or if there's I just had the word in my head and I lost it. Resistance. There's the word I was looking for. Like, if there's some resistance to it and you're questioning it and you feel guilty before you even do something, then you probably, in my opinion, this is my way I do, I wouldn't do it. Because that's usually my intuition saying, hey, something is going on that you're not aware of. So I kind of commend your partner for not making those choices, because he wanted to make a different choice. He wanted to set the trajectory in a different direction. And he honored that boundary that you set, and so, but did I feel guilty about it? Oh, heck yeah. Because I was like, dang, I let go of some business opportunities that would have probably made me a shit ton of money.
Yeah.
But would it have been worth it to sacrifice the relationship that I had been working for 20 years for money? That was like where in the present I had to really look and go, do I feel guilty for not making money, or do I feel guilty for not making, standing up for the vow that I made, 25 years ago? And I looked at it, I valued the vow because the money would come anyways. That's the way I looked at it. But I didn't really want to try to do a husband again. Like, yeah, no. I'm a one and done type person with that. But I do think a lot of us live in guilt when it comes to when we have boundaries and we implement those for other people and they do them, we do feel guilty. Like, did we take some opportunity away from them? And I don't think that we should. I think that we should honor them for standing up for that and being okay with that. So I think sometimes we misinterpret our guilt as, we've established where we want to go. And that's kind of in a way manifesting, like, hey, I want to manifest this relationship. And that's when you were talking about, that's what I heard is he wanted this relationship, even though he may have screwed up things. He wanted this relationship. So he was going to do whatever he needed to do, even if that meant sacrificing something else that he may have wanted, because it might have been that, plug-in light unicorn, not the big unicorn. And he's waiting for the big unicorn. And that will be the opportunity that both of you will go, oh, hell yeah, let's do this. And that's what.
For our listeners, the unicorn that she is referring to is this episode that we did previously. So if you have not listened to that episode yet on manifestation, we highly recommend that you go check that out.
Because it's all about unicorns and rainbows. Not. I'm just kidding. But we do talk about unicorns a lot in there.
Yes.
Because Diamond's daughter loves unicorns.
Yes, very much so. So did that help clarify is that your answer around like guilt? Can you let go of it?
Okay, so my short answer is if it's my guilt, then I always look at what can I do with it? And if it's not my guilt, I immediately give it back. Now I'm at that place in my walk where I'm like, if something comes at me and I'm like, wait a second, that's somebody projecting that on me. I'm like, oh hell, you can take that back. And I verbally announce it to the universe. So that just one practice that I've learned with me. Like if I say, Diamond, that is your problem, not my problem, you can take that back. That is exactly what I'll do. And even if the person is no longer on this plane, like has departed, give it back to them because they're spiritually somewhere, their soul somewhere. Give that stuff back to them so they can deal with it in the next lifetime, because that's their karma, not yours. And that's the way I approach it. So that's a practical tip. Just tell the universe you don't want it. Give it back.
I love that. And we are going over a little bit our goal for this episode, but I hope that you found value in this conversation. We're going to close out with this last question, and Rachel's going to kick things off with her sacral response. So
I did not know, listeners, I don't know any of these questions. I told her just throw them at me, and we'll go whatever my sacral intuition says. So there you go.
Yep. So we're rolling with it. So the last question is, are there places where I need to soften my judgments of other people's values?
Everywhere. And because, oh Lord, we could have a whole conversation around judgment and expectations. Lord have mercy. So we'll have to put that on the queue of topics. So short answer is yes, there is, because we all have expectations of what we think people should do. And when you're going through this process, or at least I think, that you'll learn to let those expectations go and let people be who they are. Because that's when you'll find their truest essence, when you allow them to be who they are. So like with your children, okay, so I have 2 very type A children and 1 very like laissez-faire child. The laissez-faire child will drive me absolutely crazy most of the time, but he's the child that I wished I could have been. So he's our second child. So go figure that. But he's so when I look at that, I want him to have certain expectations because I'm his mom and I want him to live up to certain standards. But then I also have to look at it and I have to go, if I was that kid and I got to live in that lifestyle, because I'm creating that lifestyle as a parent for him. I'm creating that ability for him to have that. because if I wasn't, he wouldn't be like that. But I saw that early on, and my husband and I wanted not to tame that. We wanted him to have that like ability to be free. But if I clamped down and said, no, you have to live up to my expectations, I would have stifled this beautiful child from being the creative that he is. And that's really what he is. And I don't know who said it, but there's somebody who said, whoever the child that you have that drives you crazy will be the one that makes you the most money or enjoyment later on in life. And I look at him as that, because he is the enjoyment. He is my softener. So he's the one that'll come up, Mom, that was kind of hard. That was harsh. Like, do you need a hug? And I'm not a touchy feely person. Like, I don't get in my feels hardly at all. And he's like, hey, Mom, do you need a hug today? Like, and so I think we all have expectations, but when we get to see that in its purest essence, and look at children, because children are like that, they're all just pure in their essence. And as long as we allow that with other people, because the soul, I think, is very childlike. And that's why we often fear getting to the soul of a person, is because we fear the lack of logic, because children have no, like, not in a bad sense, but they have no logic. They dream of unicorns and rainbows and all these fun, whimsical things, because they know what the essence of life is. And I think when we get to be adults, our logic kicks in and we lose that. And so, yeah, I think we have those expectations everywhere and those judgments, and we have to undo them. And it's hard.
I love that. My short answer, because I want us to have a very extensive conversation about this on possibly our next episode. So stay tuned. Talking about some things.
Well, we will, because we need to.
Yes. So, are there places where I need to soften my judgments of other people's values? Absolutely. And when we have that discussion, I'll talk about how even my values, I had to look at my values, because we have what we feel as though are our values, and we have what the societal context of whatever that word is sometimes. But then when you actually look up the definition and you start forming your own beliefs about how that's shown up, like, you're like, dang, actually my value, So teaser alert, that's what's happening.
I love it.
So stay tuned.
So stay tuned. Oh, and if you're just listening for the first time, we have a name for our podcast. I don't know if we said it at the beginning. We did. So hopefully you'll stick around as you see us develop our brand, I guess you could say. Like, we're completely raw with all this. It's just going out. It's going, like, both of us are free flowing with it. But we do appreciate our listeners coming. So make sure you like and subscribe us wherever you're listening to us. Share this podcast with somebody who needs to get over their issues with these numbers. And we know who you are, because if you're listening to the podcast, you're like, oh, damn, she's talking straightly at me. That person. So we know that, because we're there too. So we love our listeners, and we'll see you next time.
Love you much. See you then.